The deputy snapped handcuffs around the black mother's wrists while her 9-year-old son screamed her name from the sidewalk. People stopped walking. Drivers slowed down. Phones appeared almost instantly. And standing in the middle of that quiet Georgia street, Danielle Brooks realized something. This officer had absolutely no idea who he was dealing with. But she wasn't worried about herself. She was worried about Ethan. The little boy stood frozen beside a convenience store parking lot. His backpack hung from one shoulder. His eyes were wide with fear. And every instinct Danielle possessed as a mother wanted to run to him. The handcuffs made that impossible. "Mom!" The sound cut straight through her chest. Danielle turned her head. "It's okay, baby." Her voice remained calm. Steady. Controlled. Years of experience had taught her that panic spreads. Especially to children. Especially to your own child. The deputy standing beside her seemed unimpressed. In fact, he looked satisfied. As though he'd just solved a major case. As though he'd caught a dangerous criminal. His name tag read, Travis Cole. Danielle memorized it immediately. Not because she planned revenge. Because paying attention had become second nature. The afternoon had started so differently. Only 30 minutes earlier, she and Ethan had been laughing. The spring weather felt perfect. Warm sunlight. Clear skies. A rare weekend without work obligations. Danielle treasured those days. Single mothers learn to value every spare hour. Particularly when their careers demand long nights and unexpected phone calls. For months, she'd been promising Ethan a mother-son weekend. No meetings. No reports. No interruptions. Just the two of them. The plan was simple. Lunch. A movie. Then shopping for a new baseball glove. Nothing extravagant. Just time together. The kind of memories children remember years later. They'd stopped at a small convenience store outside town for drinks. Danielle parked her SUV. Ethan ran inside to choose snacks. Everything felt normal. Until police lights appeared behind her vehicle. At first she assumed the officer was stopping someone else. Then the patrol car pulled directly behind her. Blocking her exit. That changed things. The deputy stepped out immediately. No greeting. No smile. No explanation. Just suspicion. Danielle lowered her window. "Good afternoon, officer." The deputy barely acknowledged her. "License and registration." His tone sounded sharp. Confrontational. The interaction felt unusual from the start. Danielle had experienced enough traffic stops to recognize the difference between caution and hostility. This felt personal. Even though they'd never met. She handed over the documents. The deputy examined them briefly. Then looked at her. Then at the vehicle. Then back at her. As if searching for something. Anything. "What are you doing here?" The question sounded strange. "Taking my son to lunch." The deputy glanced toward the store entrance. Ethan had just emerged carrying a bag of chips. The little boy smiled when he saw his mother. Then noticed the officer. The smile disappeared. Travis folded his arms. "This vehicle matches a description." Danielle remained polite. "What description?" "A vehicle connected to a theft investigation." The explanation immediately made more sense. At least initially. Mistakes happen. Descriptions overlap. Misunderstandings occur. A simple conversation should have resolved everything. Or at least that's what Danielle expected. Instead, the deputy's attitude became increasingly aggressive. Questions turned into accusations. Requests became demands. His voice grew louder. His patience grew shorter. Danielle noticed nearby customers watching. She noticed the store clerk standing in the doorway. She noticed Ethan inching closer. Children always know when something feels wrong. The deputy circled the SUV. Studying it. Looking inside windows. Searching for evidence that didn't exist. Several minutes passed. Then dispatch radioed additional information. Danielle heard part of it. Enough to know the suspect vehicle wasn't even the same model. Not the same year. Not the same color. The stop should have ended right there. Instead, Travis doubled down. A decision that would later cost him dearly. You need to step out of the vehicle. Danielle complied immediately. No argument. No resistance. No attitude. She stepped onto the pavement and closed the door behind her. The deputy interpreted her calmness as weakness. That was his first mistake. Ethan hurried over. Mom. Danielle smiled reassuringly. Everything's fine. The deputy interrupted. No, stay back. The sharp command startled the boy. Ethan froze. Danielle's jaw tightened slightly. Only slightly. The deputy continued questioning her. Where she'd been. Where she worked. Why she was in town. The questions themselves weren't unusual. The delivery was. Every answer seemed to annoy him further. Finally, Travis made a decision. A terrible decision. He grabbed Danielle's wrist. The movement happened so suddenly that Ethan gasped. What are you doing? Danielle asked calmly. The deputy ignored the question. Cold metal clicked shut around one wrist. Then the other. The sound seemed impossibly loud. The entire parking lot went silent. Even the wind felt quieter. Ethan stared. Unable to process what he was seeing. His mother had never been arrested. Never been in trouble. Never even received a speeding ticket. Yet there she stood. Handcuffed. In public. The little boy's voice cracked. Mom. Several people nearby looked uncomfortable. One woman shook her head. Another began recording. A man standing near a gas pump muttered, "This doesn't look right." Danielle focused entirely on her son. Not the deputy. Not the crowd. Not the humiliation. Her son. Only her son. Listen to me, Ethan. The boy's eyes filled with tears. You're okay. His lower lip trembled. No, you're okay. Danielle forced a gentle smile. A real one. Not an easy thing to do under the circumstances. Everything is going to be fine. Then she turned toward Deputy Travis Cole. For the first time, her voice carried a different weight. Not anger. Not fear. Certainty. Deputy. He looked at her. You should think very carefully about what you're doing. Travis laughed. Actually laughed. The sound carried across the parking lot. Lady. He shook his head. I'm not worried. Danielle held his gaze for a moment. Then said nothing else. Because sometimes the people making the biggest mistakes are the ones who feel most confident. And in less than an hour, everyone inside that sheriff's department would learn exactly who Danielle Brooks really was. Everyone inside that sheriff's department would soon learn exactly who Danielle Brooks really was. But not yet. For now, she was simply a handcuffed mother sitting in the back of a patrol vehicle while her son watched through tears. The drive to the station felt longer than it actually was. Not because of distance. Because Ethan was following behind in another vehicle driven by a deputy. Danielle could handle embarrassment. She could handle false accusations. She could handle poor judgment. Watching her child suffer was different. Much different. Through the metal divider, she stared out the window. Small businesses passed by. Gas stations. Churches. Residential streets. Ordinary places filled with ordinary people. Most had no idea what was happening inside the patrol car rolling past them. Deputy Travis Cole seemed pleased with himself. Every few minutes he glanced into the rearview mirror. Not checking on Danielle. Admiring his own work. The confidence almost would have been amusing under different circumstances. Almost. Danielle remained quiet. Not because she had nothing to say. Because she was paying attention. Attention was a habit. A professional habit. The unit number on the dashboard. The condition of the equipment. The timestamp on the recording system. The deputy's procedures. The details mattered. They always mattered. 20 minutes later they arrived at the sheriff's department. The building looked older than she expected. Brick exterior. Faded signage. A flagpole near the entrance. Nothing remarkable. Just another small-town law enforcement agency. Travis opened the rear door. "Let's go." Danielle stepped out. No resistance. No complaints. No drama. Several officers standing near the entrance immediately noticed her. Then noticed the handcuffs. Then noticed Ethan climbing out of another vehicle. Expressions changed. Subtly. But noticeably. One older deputy frowned. The situation clearly made him uncomfortable. Especially the child. Children have a way of making people question things. Ethan hurried toward his mother. His face remained red from crying. "Mom." Danielle smiled immediately. The same reassuring smile she'd worn at the parking lot. "Hey, buddy. Are they taking you to jail?" The question broke something inside her. Not visibly. Internally. A 9-year-old shouldn't have to ask that question. Not like this. Not because of a misunderstanding. Danielle crouched slightly despite the handcuffs. "I need you to listen carefully." The boy nodded. "I haven't done anything wrong." His eyes searched hers. Children know when adults are lying. Ethan found no fear there. Only certainty. "Really? Really?" A small pause. "Everything will work out." The deputy escorting Ethan looked away. As though suddenly interested in something across the parking lot. Danielle noticed. People reveal themselves in difficult moments. Some choose compassion. Others choose convenience. Inside the station, paperwork began. At least that was the plan. Reality turned out differently. The desk sergeant looked confused the moment Travis explained the situation. Not suspicious. Confused. The report sounded weak. Even before questions started. "What evidence do we have?" Travis folded his arms. "Vehicle match." The sergeant frowned. "Anything else?" A pause. "No." The answer hung in the air. Not helping. Not helping at all. Danielle sat quietly nearby. Listening. Observing. The sergeant glanced toward her. Then toward Ethan. Then back toward Travis. His expression suggested he was already regretting this. Still, procedure continued. Forms appeared. Names were requested. Information entered into computers. The normal routine. Yet something unusual began happening. Danielle wasn't behaving like a typical detainee. She wasn't angry. She wasn't scared. She wasn't demanding explanations. Instead she watched. Studied. Remembered. Every name tag. Every conversation. Every camera location. Every procedural shortcut. A young deputy noticed first. Officer Rachel Morris. 26. Newer to the department. Still idealistic. Still paying attention. Rachel observed Danielle for nearly 15 minutes. Then approached her quietly. "You seem surprisingly calm." Danielle smiled. "Should I be panicking?" The question caught Rachel off guard. Most people would. Danielle leaned back slightly. Most people aren't helping their son stay calm. Rachel glanced toward Ethan. The little boy sat in a waiting area clutching his backpack. Trying very hard not to cry again. That image hit harder than any accusation. The young deputy nodded. Respect appearing where curiosity once existed. Meanwhile, Travis continued moving around the station like he'd solved a major case. Retelling the story. Emphasizing his instincts. Ignoring the growing number of skeptical looks. Because skepticism was spreading. Quietly. Like smoke. One deputy checked the original dispatch notes. Then checked them again. The vehicle description still didn't match. Not closely. Not even remotely. That bothered him. A lot. Across the room, Ethan finally spoke again. "Can I sit with my mom?" The question seemed simple. Reasonable. Human. Travis answered before anyone else could. No. The word landed hard. Even the desk sergeant looked irritated. Danielle remained composed. But internally she noted another detail. Another choice. Another unnecessary decision. Ethan lowered his head. The disappointment on his face was impossible to miss. Rachel hesitated. Then quietly pulled a chair closer to Danielle. Close enough for Ethan to sit nearby. Not touching. But near. The boy immediately moved over. Danielle smiled gratefully. Small acts of kindness matter. Especially on difficult days. Nearly 40 minutes passed. Then one of the administrative clerks approached. "Do you want to make a phone call?" Finally. Danielle nodded. Yes. The room barely paid attention. Why would they? People make calls all the time. Lawyers. Family members. Friends. Nothing unusual. The clerk handed her a phone. Danielle accepted it calmly. No rush. No emotion. No theatrics. She dialed a number from memory. The call connected almost immediately. Someone answered. Danielle spoke only one sentence. One sentence. Nothing more. "Tell Chief Reynolds that Danielle Brooks is at your station." Silence. A brief pause. Then she handed the phone back. The clerk looked puzzled. "That's it?" Danielle smiled. "That's it." Across the room, Travis laughed. Actually laughed. "Chief Reynolds?" He shook his head. "That's your plan?" Danielle didn't respond. She simply sat beside her son. Waiting. Because she knew something nobody else in that station knew. Some phone calls change everything. And less than 15 minutes from now, the first one would arrive. Less than 15 minutes from now, the first call would arrive. It took 9 minutes and 32 seconds, to be exact. Not that anyone was counting. Except Danielle. Because paying attention to details had become second nature long ago. The sheriff's department remained busy. Phones rang. Printers hummed. Deputies moved between desks. Reports were filed. Coffee cups emptied. Life continued normally. At least on the surface. Beneath that routine, tension had started building. Even those who weren't directly involved could feel it. Something about the situation felt off. The vehicle description didn't match. No stolen property had been found. No witness had identified Danielle. No evidence connected her to any crime. Yet she remained handcuffed. And her son remained frightened. Those facts bothered people. More than Travis realized. The first phone rang at the front desk. The administrative clerk answered casually. That attitude lasted approximately 3 seconds. Then her posture changed. Immediately. She sat straighter. Her expression tightened. Her eyes drifted toward Danielle. Then toward Travis. Then back toward Danielle. The clerk listened carefully. Asked 2 questions. Repeated an instruction. Then hung up. For a moment she simply stared. The desk sergeant noticed. Everything okay? The clerk hesitated. That was the county command office. The room quieted slightly. Not completely. Just enough. The sergeant frowned. What did they want? The clerk looked uncertain. Almost nervous. They asked if we currently had a Danielle Brooks in custody. Silence. Not total silence. But enough to notice. Travis laughed immediately. There you go. He pointed toward Danielle. Probably called a friend. Nobody joined the laughter. Not because they disagreed. Because something about the clerk's expression suggested otherwise. The phone rang again. This time it happened almost instantly. The same clerk answered. The same reaction followed. Only stronger. She listened. Nodded repeatedly. Then glanced toward the office hallway. Toward the sheriff's office. When the call ended, she stood. Without saying a word. Without explaining. Without hesitation. And walked directly toward the sheriff's private office. The room noticed. People always notice unusual behavior. Especially inside police departments. Travis crossed his arms. The confidence remained. But not quite as comfortably as before. Across the room, Ethan sat beside his mother. Mom. Danielle looked down. Yeah. The boy lowered his voice. Did you do something? The question carried no accusation. Only confusion. Danielle smiled gently. I made a phone call. Ethan considered that answer. Then nodded. Apparently satisfied. Children often understand more than adults expect. 3 minutes later, the sheriff emerged from his office. Sheriff Walter Jenkins. 28 years in law enforcement. Respected throughout the county. Known for staying calm under pressure. At that moment, calm looked difficult. He walked directly toward the front desk. Not speaking. Not smiling. The clerk handed him a note. He read it once. Then again. Then a third time. His eyes slowly lifted toward Danielle. The sheriff had never met her. Not personally. But he knew the name. Very well. And suddenly, every piece of the puzzle fell into place. The composure. The observation. The confidence. The phone call. The certainty. All of it. His face changed. The transformation wasn't dramatic. It was worse. Because it was real. The kind of realization people have when they discover they've stepped into a disaster. Travis noticed immediately. Sheriff? No response. The sheriff continued looking at Danielle. Then finally asked, Ma'am. A pause. A careful pause. Would you mind telling me your full name? Danielle met his gaze. Danielle Renee Brooks. The sheriff closed his eyes briefly. Just briefly. Like a man confirming information he desperately hoped was wrong. Unfortunately for him, it wasn't. The phone rang again. This time the sheriff answered personally. Nobody could hear the person on the other end. But Everyone could hear the sheriff. "Yes, sir." A pause. "Yes, sir, she's here." Another pause. A much longer one. The sheriff's expression grew increasingly uncomfortable. "Understood." A pause. "Immediately." Then the call ended. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The entire room felt suspended. Waiting. Watching. Trying to understand. Finally the sheriff turned toward Travis. "Take the handcuffs off." The order landed like a thunderclap. Travis blinked. "What? Now?" No room for interpretation. No room for debate. The deputy stared. Certain he had misunderstood. "Sir, she's a suspect." The sheriff's response arrived instantly. "No." A pause. "She isn't." The room became perfectly still. Every deputy. Every clerk. Every civilian. Every eye focused on the same moment. Travis looked confused. Then annoyed. Then uncertain. For the first time all afternoon, uncertainty appeared. Slowly. Like a crack forming in glass. The handcuffs came off. The metallic click sounded very different this time. Not like authority. Like a mistake being corrected. Danielle rubbed one wrist gently. Nothing more. No celebration. No smug expression. No speech. The restraint impressed several people. Especially those who now suspected something significant was happening. The sheriff straightened his uniform. Then addressed the room. His voice sounded noticeably different. Formal. Respectful. Careful. "Ladies and gentlemen." He swallowed. "This is Commander Danielle Brooks." Nobody reacted at first. The title didn't register immediately. Then it did. And when it did, the room changed. Several deputies froze. Rachel Morris nearly dropped her pen. The desk sergeant looked stunned. One officer actually whispered, "Oh no." The sheriff continued. "Commander Brooks is the head of the Internal Affairs Review Unit." Complete silence. Real silence. The kind that feels physical. Travis stared at Danielle. Then laughed nervously. A reflex. Not confidence. Panic. Because he finally understood. And understanding hit hard. Very hard. The sheriff wasn't finished. Commander Brooks has been overseeing departmental conduct reviews throughout the region. Another pause. A dangerous pause. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "Deputy Cole." The sheriff looked directly at him. "Your name already appears in one of those reviews." The color drained from Travis's face. Instantly. Gone. Several deputies turned toward him. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. The truth had arrived. And it arrived all at once. Outside, multiple government vehicles turned into the parking lot. Dark sedans. County units. State investigative vehicles. One after another. One after another. One after another. The sheriff saw them through the window first. Then everyone else did. Danielle remained seated beside Ethan. Calm. Composed. Professional. Because she knew something the others were only beginning to understand. The real investigation was about to start. The real investigation was about to start. Nobody inside the sheriff's department said a word. Not immediately. The arrival of the state vehicles had changed everything. A few minutes earlier, Deputy Travis Cole had been the most confident person in the building. Now he looked like a man trying to remember every decision he'd made that afternoon. And finding fault with all of them. Outside, doors opened. Investigators entered. Professional. Calm. Purposeful. No raised voices. No dramatic confrontations. That made the situation even more uncomfortable. Because real accountability rarely arrives with shouting. It arrives with paperwork. Evidence. And questions nobody wants to answer. Danielle remained seated beside Ethan. Her hands rested calmly in her lap. The handcuffs were gone. But the marks they left remained visible. Thin red impressions around her wrists. Ethan noticed them immediately. The little boy reached over. Gently touching one mark. Does it hurt? Danielle looked down. Then smiled. A little. The answer was honest. Children deserve honesty. Especially after difficult days. Ethan frowned. He shouldn't have done that. Several nearby deputies lowered their eyes. Because there was no good response. Not after everything they had learned. Not after everything they had seen. The state investigators began collecting information. Body camera footage. Dispatch records. Incident reports. Witness statements. Security. Video from the convenience store. Every piece of the story started falling into place. And every piece pointed in the same direction. Deputy Cole had received updated information. Deputy Cole knew the vehicle didn't match. Deputy Cole continued anyway. The facts were becoming impossible to ignore. Rachel Morris watched quietly from across the room. Something about Danielle impressed her. Not the title. Not the authority. The restraint. Most people would have exploded. Most people would have demanded apologies. Most people would have used the moment to humiliate everyone responsible. Danielle did none of those things. She simply cooperated. The same way she had from the beginning. Hours passed. Statements were taken. Reports were reviewed. Questions were answered. Eventually one of the lead investigators approached Danielle. Commander Brooks. She looked up. We'd like a private room if you're ready. Danielle nodded. Then looked toward Ethan. The boy immediately stood. As if worried she might disappear again. The investigator noticed. His expression softened. Your son can come too. Relief crossed Ethan's face. Small. But obvious. Together they followed the investigators down a hallway. The room wasn't large. Just a conference room. A table. Several chairs. A wall covered with departmental maps. Nothing special. Yet the atmosphere felt different. More personal. Less official. One investigator closed the door. Then sat across from Danielle. Commander, we'd like your recommendation. The question surprised several people in the room. Especially Ethan. The boy looked at his mother. Then at the investigators. Then back at his mother again. The lead investigator continued. Given everything that happened today. A pause. What action would you like us to take? The room became very quiet. Because everyone knew the truth. Danielle possessed enormous influence. A single recommendation from her could carry tremendous weight. The investigator waited. So did everyone else. Danielle folded her hands. Thinking carefully. Not because she didn't know the answer. Because she understood the importance of getting it right. Finally she spoke. My recommendation doesn't matter. The investigator blinked. It doesn't. Danielle shook her head. No. A pause. The evidence matters. The words landed heavily. Professional. Measured. Principled. Exactly what internal affairs was supposed to represent. She continued. If Deputy Cole violated policy, follow policy. Another pause. If he abused authority, document it. The investigator listened carefully. Danielle's voice never changed. No anger. No bitterness. No revenge. Just integrity. And if mistakes were made. She glanced briefly toward Ethan. Make sure they don't happen again. The room remained silent. Not because people disagreed. Because they respected the answer. Back in the main office, Travis sat alone. The confidence was completely gone now. The reality of the situation had finally settled in. He replayed the afternoon repeatedly. The parking lot. The accusations. The handcuffs. The child. Every memory felt worse than the one before it. Sheriff Jenkins eventually approached. Neither man spoke for several seconds. Then the sheriff sighed. 28 years in law enforcement had taught him many lessons. Some harder than others. You know what the worst part is? Travis looked up. The sheriff continued. She never once tried to use her position. The deputy said nothing. Because it was true. From the first minute until the last. Danielle never threatened anyone. Never revealed her title. Never demanded special treatment. She simply expected fairness. The same fairness every citizen deserved. That realization hurt. A lot. Late that evening, Danielle and Ethan finally left the station. The sun had started setting. Orange light stretched across the parking lot. The air felt cooler. Quieter. Peaceful. For the first time all day, it felt like they could breathe. As they walked toward their SUV, Ethan slipped his hand into hers. Something he hadn't done in years. Not often, anyway. The gesture caught her by surprise. They reached the vehicle. Stopped. And stood together for a moment. Then Ethan asked the question that mattered most. Mom. Danielle smiled. Yeah. The boy looked thoughtful. Very thoughtful. Weren't you angry? The question lingered. Danielle considered it. Carefully. Because children remember answers to questions like that. Sometimes for the rest of their lives. Finally she nodded. A little. Ethan seemed surprised. Then why didn't you yell? Danielle looked toward the fading sunlight. Then back toward her son. Because anger doesn't fix a broken system. The boy listened closely. Every word. Then what does? Danielle squeezed his hand gently. Integrity. The answer seemed simple. But Ethan could tell it mattered. Very much. Several weeks later, the investigation concluded. Deputy Travis Cole was suspended pending further disciplinary action. Additional complaints surfaced. Old reports were reviewed. New training procedures were implemented. Policies changed. Supervision improved. Not because one person demanded it. Because accountability required it. Life slowly returned to normal. Or as normal as possible. Danielle resumed her work. Ethan returned to school. The difficult day became a memory. But not the lesson. That remained. Months later, Ethan accompanied his mother to a departmental award ceremony. Officers from multiple counties filled the room. Command staff sat near the stage. Community leaders occupied front row seats. When Danielle entered, people stood. Not out of fear. Out of respect. Ethan watched everything. The uniforms. The badges. The applause. Then he looked at his mother. And finally understood something. Power wasn't the handcuffs. Power wasn't the badge. Power wasn't making people obey. Real strength was remaining fair when you had every reason not to be. A deputy handcuffed a black single mother in front of her son. What he didn't know was that she was leading an internal affairs investigation. But the lesson that changed everything wasn't about rank. It wasn't about authority. It wasn't even about justice. It was about character. Because titles reveal power. Character reveals who deserves it.